Okay.
Three-step process here. There we go. I have Facebook.
We're like in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yeah, we're just about there now.
All right, we're live. Let's do it.
Okay.
It is a bunch, yeah.
All right, so let's try to encapsulate these complicated pages and make it simple. So we spoke about this pasuk, right, which is Ata hu Hashem levadecha, Ata asisas hashamayim, v'ata machayas kulam. We explained there are basically 3 stages in the onset of reality. The first grouping represents the Or Ein Sof, where Hashem is alone, and the light is shining in such a way that it negates the existence of any other thing. Then we say, V'ata asisas hashamayim, you made the heavens, introducing the heavens, but at the same time, we said that the Ata there is without a Hey at the end, indicating a removal of light, tzimtzum, and the creation of Metzias, right? Really, essentially removing all the Or Ein Sof and bringing in the first stage of the Kav, whose function is to create this feeling of self. And then we said, V'ata machayas kulam is this notion of the third stage where the penimius of the Kav, it's also accomplished through the Kav, but the Kav here is talking about the penimius of the Kav, the aspect of it which is still connected to the Or Ein Sof from before the Tzimtzum, and it's able to funnel the infinite light into a reality that's after the existence comes into being. Does everyone remember all this? And so we said ultimately that's really the highest level. We said that this is kind of like a concept of Chesed, Gevur, and Tiferes, because we said that this third stage is called reaching to a place called Tiferes HaNe'elam, the hidden Tiferes. What's the idea of Tiferes? That which binds opposites together. So we said Chesed is the infinite light, which doesn't leave room for existence, is the first stage. Followed by Gevurah, and both these two things are limited because they can't bear each other. Essentially, if the light is there, then the notion of Hashem's ability to be in a state of limitation and absence of light is not able to surface. And when the Tzimtzum surfaces, then the infinite light cannot be there at the same time. It basically shows on a limitation of the Or Ein Sof that it can't withstand the Tzimtzum. So the third level is really this truly unlimited level, right? Because it taps into this Tiferes HaNe'elam, where those two opposites, which cannot be residing at the same time, in their source, they were really one, right? Because they're both coming from Hashem, and Hashem bears them both. And so the level of Tiferes HaNe'elam basically brings the true nature of the Atzmus, where you can have both existence and infinity at the same time. And sort of the visual of this is literally a kav of light. It's like a deal that was struck, right? It's not infinite light, it's not infinite darkness. It's some darkness and it's some light. They sort of reside together and share this space. And we gave an analogy of a drop of water that's like pushes itself out of the walls of a barrel. The barrel is filled with water, and there's a lot of pressure. One drop will come out of the barrel on the other side. And even though comparatively to the water in the barrel, it's just a drop, we said the idea that it breaks through the edges of the barrel and can be seen on the other side shows it has a certain power which all the water in the barrel doesn't have. It has the power to like break through. And so it's contained inside of that one drop a much greater source than all the water that's in the barrel. Remember all this, yes? Okay. So then we start to explain one more point. It's basically the same idea, just inside the verse. We now go back and we could explain that these 3 verses are all really descriptions of the essence itself, right? When it says Ata Hashem hu levadecha, right? There, the word Ata, in all these cases, Ata is referring to the Atzmus himself, right? Hashem himself. And the following words are basically revelations that come from the Atzmus. So there's 3 different types of revelations that come from the Atzmus. The first one is Ata, hu Hashem levadecha. This is a revelation that the Atzmus can produce infinite light, where it negates the existence of anything else but Hashem. That's why it's called alone. So the Ata is Hashem, hu Hashem. We said before the hu is the infinite light. The Havaya There's a little drop of water inside that infinite light, right? Before all that was before the Tzimtzum. Am I saying things you remember? And all of that is called Levadecha because this version of Ata is revealing his what's called Koach Habli Gevul, the power of being infinite, thus not giving anything else the possibility to exist. The second Ata is Ata missing Hey, basically. It's Ata Asis Hashemayim. It's also from the Atzmus, but it's a new Koach from the Atzmus that's being revealed, which is called the Koach of Gevul, the power of Hashem to be finite if he wants to. Right? The Ata can do that because it contains both these powers. And the third level of Ata Machayes Kulam, this is finally basically the notion that you can give Chayes, which Chayes here represents a dose of the Or Ein Sof, while you're still keeping the Metzias of the world around. That's the true nature of the Atzmus, right? That's the Atzmus itself, the true Ata, where it's basically showing you both of its kochos at the same time. Follow? Okay, this is pretty much a review of what we did before. So let's take it from page Kuf Vav.
The only way that can exist is because in the time of Hashem is that the Pharaohs are both
Exactly.
strong enough in the highest possible Atmos of the Pharaohs.
Exactly. It's revealing the actual Atzmos. Each other one was revealing like a koach of the Atzmos. Right, and therefore it has the power to join these two opposites together. Very good. So, second paragraph down from page Kuf Vav. V'zeu ma shekasuv v'atam mechayes kulam. If you note, there's actually a difference between the two first atas and the third ata, because the third one has a vav in front of it. V'ata b'tosefes vav. Shemura al giloy de atzmus or in sov shebakav emtzoi. This vav, right, is there to show you a revelation of the atzmus or in sov in the kav emtzoi, in the middle column. The vav is basically this idea of the tiferes shemachaber shnei afachim the chesed gevura. This is what the vav represents. This the middle, right, the balance between the two of them. V'kiyadua, as it's known, be'inyan hagadol hagibur v'hanora. Why does the vav represent the middle column? Why is the vav tiferes? He says because there's another place that we see this same exact thing play out in the Shmona Esrei, which is really a quote from the Torah. But it says hagadol hagibur v'hanora, and we call Hashem big and mighty and awesome, great, mighty, and awesome. Shehem gimel kavin chesed gevur tiferes, and we're alluding to the three. Why do we call Hashem specifically those three things? There's actually a Gemara where there was a Tana that was davening from the Amud, and he like added in more accolades, and he said he great, awesome, mighty, and wise, and kind, and all different types of things. And then he like sort of ran out, and there was like people in the crowd. They were like, "Well, keep going." He's like, "I don't know anything to say." So she said, "If you can't keep going, then you shouldn't have started." In other words, just use the three that the Torah uses, because Hashem's called Hagadol Hagibur V'Hanora in the Torah. So let's keep it there. He started naming attributes of Hashem. But these three are basically the essential ones that God gave himself, which refer to Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes. Gadol is Chesed, Gibor obviously is Gevurah, and V'Hanora, and awesome, represents Tiferes, as we'll soon see. And this is the idea of also Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which we're alluding to when you say the Shemona Esrei, which are the Gimel Kavim of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. And the Mashik Asu V'Hanora, you'll note also, just like in the pasuk that we're describing, where there's a Vav right before the third Ata. Also, when we mention the attributes on singular without a pasuk, it's also Hagadol Hagibur V'Hanora with a Vav attached to the third one. Right? Vav, and this is the idea. What does Vav go on? V'Hanora Tiferes. Right? The third one is Tiferes. Hu ki b'tiferes yeshnu agili the atzmus orein so shlamayl mischalkus. Kavin, right? And why is that? The vav also, just what does the word vav mean in Hebrew? And, right? So it's like, it's not just this or this, it's and this. It's basically coming to explain to you that it's adding a whole new dimension that wasn't in either of the first two. Because the first two, as we said before, were just sort of a power of Hashem, or the opposite power of Hashem. And is basically this. This is not just one or the other power of Hashem. It's the totality of Hashem's powers.
Isn't vav actually like even before and it means like hook, right? So something that connects to things.
Yeah.
Like there's a vav.
Yeah, a vav also and connects two things.
Yeah.
Right? That's why it's a hook. I'm not sure which one comes first. But right, it's the idea. It's mechaber, two things. That's the whole idea, right? When you say and, you now have this and this, right? So this is the idea of v'hanora, because hanora, which is like this awesomeness, this something which is just beyond. It's connecting gadol and gibur, just like Yaakov. He was a product of Avram and Yitzchak. Right? He mentioned that this was his chus, the God of Avram and the God of Yitzchak were his strength. And that's why we say, right after we say Vahanora, we say Kel Elyon. Right? It's like as though in the Shemona Esrei, it's as though we're describing what Hanora is, it's the higher Kel. Right? Because even though we called it Tiferes, right? Which let me put some pieces together here. Right? In general, we say that there's Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes also has divine names that are associated with them. Chesed is what's the divine name associated with Chesed? Kel. What's the divine name associated with Gevurah? Elokim. And Havaya is Tiferes, right? Where we see Havaya is Tiferes, Haya, Hoveh, V'yihiyeh, B'sifara. We say in the Adon Olam, right? Havaya is Tiferes. So in general, when we're saying V'hanora, it's going on Shem Havaya. But here he calls it Kel Elyon, right? So what is it? Is it Kel or is it Havaya? So Kel Elyon, because there's an association with Tiferes, specifically with Chesed. What is it? Essentially, if you think about these attributes that Tiferes is also called Rachamim, or mercy. So I think we discussed this even, right? So the idea is that when you have a person wants to give, and then something comes and says he's not fit to give, and then you give anyway, right? Which is essentially what we're describing. The kav comes after the tzimtzum and says, okay, I understand no light, but we're going to give light anyway. That's called mercy, right? He doesn't really deserve it, but you've taken into account his lack of merit, and you give it anyway. It's called rachamim, mercy, right? It's also called tiferes, because it's a blend, just like tiferes is basically means beautiful. It's a blend of two colors. So too, the mercy is a blend of I'll give you anything. Wait a second, I shouldn't give you anything. So those two things then blend together in tiferes, or it's also called mercy. But additionally, it's really the return of chesed, because the material that's coming is basically the same general direction as chesed, right? Chesed wants to give, but chesed is willing to give without any consideration of whether the person's fit or not. So Gevurah comes in its place and says, no one's fit, so it doesn't give. So when you give again, you're basically just coming back with chesed. And this is also what it says in the pasuk, Yaakov asher pada es Avraham. Right? There's a pasuk that says Yaakov redeemed Avraham. What's the concept over there? We spoke, the simple meaning is that Avram had one good kid and one bad kid, right? So also Yitzchak had one good and one bad kid. So it's almost like we don't know if Avram was responsible for Yishmael and Esav destroying the world, or if he was like the father of the Jewish people and monotheism. So it says when Yaakov came around, his bed was perfect, right? He only had 12 perfect tzaddikim, all of them were perfect. So it showed on Avraham that he did have like a perfect seed inside of him. So Yaakov redeems Avraham.
Wouldn't be Yitzchak also, the Gevurah, in the Gevurah?
Yitzchak redeemed Avram partially, but then all of a sudden he had also Esav. There's a pasuk that says Yaakov redeemed Avraham. I'm just trying to explain why.
No, just one Yitzchak. Like, what didn't
he had one bad kid?
Yeah, so did Avram. I'm saying that he was redeemed to the Tiferes, the Chesed, and the Gevurah.
I'm not arguing that he redeemed Yitzchak. I'm just telling you there's a pasuk that says Yaakov redeemed Avraham. I'm trying to explain.
Who had like perfect kids?
No, but he's saying that Avram needed redeeming because he had one bad kid. Right. Yitzchak also needed redeeming because he had one bad kid. Yaakov redeemed him also. But this is the reason why. But Panimius Inyanim, because what we're really saying is, what does it mean to redeem Avraham? Avraham represents chesed, this interest in giving, right? And when I told you that's just the pshat. In other words, but the pshat has actually, you can ask questions on the pshat. But the deeper meaning is that the whole Indian of Avram is that it's like a hisgalus, a revelation of light. The problem is Yitzchak puts limitations on that to the extreme, so that the light can't come out again. What Yaakov does is he reintroduces the light. So the main thing is that he's redeeming Avram, because the purpose of him is that the light should come out, right? Yitzchak stopped the light. So Yitzchak didn't redeem Avram, and in a certain sense, Yitzchak doesn't need redeeming, because his purpose is to withhold, right? I'm talking about in the Hasidic way of looking at it. He's Gevurah, so he's holding it back. So in other words, he's the problem, right? So Yaakov comes and redeems Avram. He brings the original light back, which was stopped by Yitzchak. And that's, again, the idea that he is... Ooh, I'm going to get that out of there. He is... this is okay, so going back, so what do we see? That Rachamim, or Yaakov, is basically the same thing as Avraham. The same midah of Abraham. It's really chesed. It's just that it's chesed that's now been able to push through all limitations. And therefore, when we say Hagadol Hagibor v'hanora, which is referring to Yaakov, we right away then say Kel Elyon. Kel refers to what? Chesed, right? But after you get to Yaakov, you sort of redeem the Kel. It can come back again. The chesed can come back, so we call it Kel Elyon. You get that?
A higher chesed.
It's like it's the original chesed.
Saying Tiferes is a higher chesed?
Yes, it's basically able to redeem chesed, but where other chesed fails to be able to show itself, Tiferes, the chesed inside of Tiferes, is able to push forth.
Usable chesed. Usable chesed.
And this notion of this vav, which brings back the essence of the Or Ein Sof, which precedes everything. That's why it's able to join the Chesed and Gevurah, the Vav, the and, bring them both together, because it takes Gevurah also into account and is able to overcome the obstacles. V'zeu gam ha'biurim b'zeh sheYaakov, which is Tiferes, who osios yibaka. All right, we're getting to like a new stage of the mimer here. This is a very important piece of the puzzle. Now that we've sort of turned this whole Va'ata machayes kulam into a vav, and the vav represents Yaakov and Tiferes, we're now going to see that the word Yaakov is the same letters as Yibaka, which means to break forth. Just like that little drop that comes out of the side of the barrel. It's like a bekia, right? So we're going to be working on that for a while. There's a pasuk, right? In Yeshaya it says, Az Yibaka keshachar orecha. The pasuk says, then it will break through like morning your light. And this idea of like when the morning light comes and breaks through, it's similar to the idea of Tiferes, like there's a darkness of night that no light can shine in. Also there's like a little ray of hope and sunshine. This is called Yaakov, right? It's called breaking through like morning your light. And it's literally the same letters as Yaakov. Kizesha or hakav bokeh es choshech hatzimtzum. This, that the light of the kav is able to break forth through the light, the darkness of the tzimtzum. Nimshach gam ba'olam shenishav ma'atzimtzum, and he's talking about the infinite quality of the Or Ein Sof, that it's able to now come through, and infinite can dwell inside of the finite space of the worlds. Hu b'pnei sheshorah sham shachasu mitiferes hanelam. It's really because the source of this comes from this hidden Tiferes, which precedes the Chesed and Gevurah, and that is called the Midah of Yaakov. Okay, so if you recall, we started, one of the questions of this mimer, the point of the mimer is that he was wanting to explain the difference between Yaakov and Yosef. This is a mimer for the bar mitzvah of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he basically was giving it to him in order to tell him his charge in this world and what his name meant so that he could fulfill his mission with an extra empowerment. And he said, but in order to understand what Yosef is, we have to first understand what Yaakov is. So all the mimer up until now has been an attempt to understand what Yaakov is. We're finally getting there. And it really comes from the letters of Yaakov's name, and it's breaking through, and it represents this idea of v'ata machayas kulam, with the vav, and the ability to add opposites together and bring infinite into the finite.
Sorry, what's that Rosh Deva with the Taf?
Tiferes.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so let's go into Dalet. Hine Yedua It's known that the sending forth of the kav, right, it really ends in Atzilus. In other words, Atzilus, let's say, is the first world that happens after the Tzimtzum, right? And in other words, Atzilus is basically the beginning of the world, the four worlds that start after the contraction. Atzilus, Bria, Tzir, Nasiya, which is like the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Atzilus is the first world, and when the Kav breaks through, it is able to make it into the worlds. But which worlds? It only goes up and is revealed. Look, first of all, the Kav, remember, has two parts. The Kav has the part of making the experience of self, and then it has this idea of funneling in the Orient Sof, which is a return of the infinite. So when it comes down, there's no possibility of existence in any of the worlds without the Kav at some level being there, because it's the light of existence. But when we're saying that the Kav ends in Atzilus, what we mean is the idea of Yaakov's addition to the Kav, the infinite being trucked into the finite, that only comes down until Atzilus, which means the lower three worlds, Bria, Tzir, and Asiya, they lack that up quality of the breakthrough, and they're just made out of the lower part of the Kav, which is the finite notion, and therefore they experience themselves as independent. The Bria is the first world after Atzilus, and what's the definition of the word Bria? A creation, which means by definition there's a creator over there and a creation over here. It's already separateness. So the whole notion of like fusing the infinite with the worlds, it sort of ends only at the first world. Atzilus grabs that power of Yaakov, but it doesn't continue down to the lower worlds. Let's look at footnote 34. It's a little complicated, but let's try it. He says, "Dezesha arasakav shaba kelim de malchus datzilus baka parse imahem." Now this is a quote from the Tanya, and it seems a bit of a contradiction to what I just explained to you, because he says that they shine from the kav that's in the kelim of malchus of Atzilus, right? So we just got through saying, fine, the kav comes in and feels at home in Atzilus, right? The infinite light breaks through to Atzilus. And what's the final sphere of Atzilus? Malchus of Atzilus, right? So if the kav was going to go into Bria, Tzir, Nasiya, it would come from Malchus into them. You following Yitzchak? And we're saying now that in fact in the Tanya it does say that a shine of the kav, right, which is in the kelim of Malchus of Atzilus, right, because all of Atzilus has some kav in it, and in the kelim of Malchus of Atzilus it still resides this infinite nature of the kav, and he says over there it breaks through the parsa, which is the curtain separating Atzilus and Bria, imahem, with the kav breaks through in those kelim, together with the kelim. I actually spoke about this on Shabbos. The vessels of Malchus of Atzilus go and become the lights of the lower three worlds, and with them, it says, is the kav, right? Because the kelim are carrying the light. Umeir behem b'biyah, and it shines in biyah. This seems, if you're paying attention, like opposite of what I just said, because it sounds from this point of the Tanya that the kav does break through and come into the lower worlds. What's that? Bia is Bria, Tzir, Nasiya, the lower three worlds. They're kind of grouped together.
It's coming in as the kav of Atzilus, so it's not coming in as the actual. It's not coming in as the actual light. It's not coming in as the actual Orient Sof. It's coming in as the already processed kelim of once already hit Atzilus.
What makes you say that?
It looks like light for them.
No, because for them it's the light. They're not getting the actual Orient Sof. They're getting the kelim of what is already come into the world of Atzilus.
But it says that the light of the kav, which is in the kelim of Malchus of Atzilus, breaks through the curtain with them, with the kelim, and that implies that. And then he says, and shines in them. Look at this. You're going to be exactly with the words, because he says umeir bahem b'biyah, and it shines in them in biyah, just like it does in Atzilus. But look what he says, meir bahem dafka. It shines in them, meaning what? Inside of those kelim of Atzilus that break through, the kav shines. But it doesn't shine into the worlds that are made by those kelim, right? So in other words, it is there, and it's shining there, but only to the aspect of Atzilus, which is in those worlds. Let me explain what I mean to you by that, right? In the Malchus of Atzilus, it's very, very connected to what we spoke about on Shabbos, right? We talked about that there's 30 kalim, because we're 30 years from the Rebbe's Gimel Tammuz, and we said the idea of David HaMelech lived for 30 years. I mean, reigned for 30 years. And it says in the Pirkei Avos that in the qualities of a king, there's 30 qualities. And there's this very big connection with 30 to the concept of a king. And this is why, in its essence, because Malchus, which is called the king, right, it drops like 30 parts on the lower worlds. How does that work? Because there's 3 levels of the vessel. I want to go through this again because it's exactly what he's talking about here. It's just a little bit crazy hashgacha pratis that we just spoke about this. I don't think anyone really understood what I was saying yesterday, so let's do it again. Right? What's that? There's 10 spheres of each level of kli inside of the vessels of Atzilus. So Atzilus is all godly, and there's kalim there. Usually you think of kalim as something which like sort of covers over, and it's not as godly as light. But in Atzilus, the kalim are different. In Atzilus, also the kalim are godly. They don't conceal God. They're basically just a different aspect of God. Yeah, transparent kalim, right? So in this case, like any kli, you have 3 parts of a kli. You have the part of the kli that holds, which is called the panemius of the kli, which touches the liquid. You have the kli itself, and then you have the part that you can hold, the chitzonius of the kli, right? So those are 3 different levels of in any kli, called rosh, toch, sof. And because everything has 10, what you got there? A bug in my coffee again. It's not good. It's not good. He's went right into the toe. No, he ran into the rosh. That's even worse. All right, let's see if we can bear this class without coffee. I'll try. They don't pay me enough. Okay, so so listen, this is a little bit complicated. So you have these 3 levels of the vessel. When those levels then, what is Malchus good for, right? It comes in, gives hashpah to the lower worlds. The godliness which is in Atzilus is responsible for creating the lower worlds. But not the godliness of the lights of Atzilus, because the lights of Atzilus are far too powerful to have anything to do with the lower worlds. We just got through saying the lights of Atzilus are infused with Tiferes HaNe'elam, and the Kav is shining an infinite there. That can't make its way down. But the Kalim make it their way down. And the idea is that there are 10 spheros of light, which is Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Each one has 10 spheres of light. Sometimes we call it Neshama, Ruach, Nefesh. What those are really the 10 Kalim of Atzilus. When they come down and become into the next world, to enliven the next world, those kalim become the lights of those worlds. So what was the body, so to speak, of Atzilus, in 3 parts, becomes the light of the 3 lower worlds. So the 3 lower worlds are not even dealing with the light of Atzilus, they're only dealing with the vessels of Atzilus, and as far as they're concerned, that's considered light. And not only light, that's what's enlivening all of those worlds. Now what we're saying is, hold on, the Kav, which was in those vessels, breaks through and comes with them, and shines in them, quote, Meir Bahem, so that goes against the theory that we're now presenting, which is that the Kav, the infinite light, which Yaakov burst through after the Tzimtzum, it only went into Atzilus. It didn't go into the lower 3 worlds. Here in the Tanya, he says, it broke through with them and shines in them. You following the contradiction? So the Rebbe points out in this footnote, it shines in them, right? In those 30 lights, which is like the life force of the lower 3 worlds, which is actually the Kalim of Atzilus in those worlds, right? Those are the vessels of Atzilus in those worlds, which become the light of those worlds. In the vessels of Atzilus in those worlds, the light is shining. But it doesn't actually shine out of those vessels to be experienced in the actual worlds of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya. So it's in there, but it's basically tucked away, and that's what we mean. We say the Kav really ends at Atzilus, because the revelation of the Kav, it stays in Atzilus. It even stays in Atzilus when Atzilus goes down into the lower worlds. But it doesn't get out of Atzilus in order to come into the experience of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya. You follow? Yeah.
You said that the kalim of Atzilus shine, like normally a kalim don't shine.
Right, right. Because they're kalim compared to, like you said, they're like transparent kalim. So compared to Atzilus, their vessels, compared to the lower worlds, they're actually the lights of those lower worlds.
I'm trying to think, like, if they shine, like, what do they do? Like, are they like, is it like a light bulb?
Yeah,
Do
it's
they,
like, well,
focus the light or make the light? Like,
no, it's the soul and life force of every single thing in that world. So, for example, there would be other kalim, which are kalim of Bria, which are like real kelim. Like it's basically wrapping, it's like a body wrapped around a soul, or garments wrapped around a body. And then the light, which is inside of those garments, are the vessels of Atzilus that we just spoke about. They become literally the soul of the world, of each world. The fact that there's any living experience in any of those three worlds is because they're accessing some level of the kelim of Atzilus.
But you're saying within those vessels, the light inside the vessel is actually still in Atzilus? What are you saying?
It's Atzilus as it's exported into these other worlds.
I
In
was
other words,
thinking
it's
it's kinda
called Atzilus of Bria, or Atzilus of Yetzirah.
I was thinking it's kind of like an embassy. It's like a little.
Yes,
part
it's like
of
an
a
embassy.
country where
Yes,
it
yes.
operates, has the same
That's
rules
right.
and everything.
That's
but
right.
it's in a different
And in
place.
theory, like if the president comes to the embassy of Israel, American president comes to the American embassy of Israel, he's still not in Israel.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I'm saying. Like even the Orein Sof that break through the Kav, even though it's in the embassy, still didn't come and like greet the people of that country.
Subject to the rules of Atzilus.
Right.
So it's not in the actual world. So they're just.
It's in there, but it's like it's hidden in there, right?
Wait, so is it in the? I thought it was only in the Kalim. I thought it wasn't in the actual world.
It's in the Kalim, but don't forget those Kalim go and become the lights of those lower worlds. So as those Kalim are busy being the lights of those other worlds, in those Kalim is the Kav. You know, it's just the Kav doesn't leave the Kalim ever, right?
So it's kind of dragging through every single one of the worlds, the Kalim and the Kav together.
Right. So there is the infinite actual light in all of the worlds. It's just that it's not it's not showing itself, and that's actually the point of where we're going with this, right? We got to get it out of there. Okay, so fine. So back to the first line here that the Hamshach of the Kav ends in Atzilus. K'mavur b'Maimer, as explained in the Maimer. This that Yaakov, who is the same letters as break forth, where the Kav comes out and enters Atzilus, and we said he's Briach Tichon, Hamabriach Min HaKatzel HaKatzel. If you remember before, we said he was the central beam, like in the Mishkan, that went all the way through, right? Remember that we spoke about the idea of the central beam. It was inside the wood, and it went from one end to the other, which means he can connect the top to the bottom. Yaakov, Kol HaKavod, he goes from one extreme to the other. But what does it say in the Maimer? Hu miketza shamayim de le'ela ad ketza shamayim de lasata. He does not connect heaven and earth. He connects the higher part of heaven to the lower part of heaven. That's what it says. Which means, if you think about it, where is that beam? It's in the Mishkan. It's not like he's beaming it all the way to Brooklyn over there. You know what I'm saying? The beam is from one end to the other, one extreme to the other, inside of Kedusha.
Brooklyn is the bottom.
Brooklyn's the bottom.
The worst part of it.
It's literally the lowest part of reality. I'm serious. It says that's what I think someone even told me once, if you take like a pin from Jerusalem across the world or from the Midbar somewhere, it like gets to like mamish like Brooklyn. It's like the whole idea is that the Torah is intended to go to the Tachton Shein Tachton Yosef Menu. Like
That's why the Rebbe's in Brooklyn.
that's why the Rebbe's in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
why is Brooklyn so low?
I don't know.
You've been there?
This is all
No, just because it's as far as you can get from the kedusha that God came into the world, and like, so the world is a circle, is a sphere, and the idea is when Hashem, there's something called the Chetzi Kadur HaElyon and the Chetzi Kadur HaTachtun. So that when God came to the world and he came down to a certain point in coordinates, right?
Yeah.
And that whole hemisphere became elevated. So the other side of the world is basically called the Tachtum. When God will get there, he'll lift up the entire world. And so literally, the whole design of creation was so that the Jews would eventually spread the deepest lights of Torah from the furthest part of the world, from where Torah was given.
So like if the Jews weren't there or in the areas where they're not Jews, like it's like the lowest place of the world. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
Brooklyn's
Literally, literally based on where God visited the world,
Yeah.
and like Gan Eden and like all the good stuff happened. It's literally the lowest place.
We see that in the world.
Yeah, it's as far as you can get it's down under, right? From where like Sinai is. And since it's the physically furthest, we learn from there it's also spiritually the furthest.
We see it's the furthest.
I'm saying it was the last inhabited land on earth, right? It was basically just, so we talk about the idea of like where a desert is where man does not dwell. Man is also a reference to God, the man that sits in the chariot. If man does not dwell there, there's no civilization, there's no Jews, there's no Torah. So it's like a desert. It's like it's a forgotten wasteland where there can't be kedusha. There's not even people, right? So it was left like that for all of creation, right?
Like California took longer for people to get to, didn't it?
What's that? California has a
San
pattern.
Francisco, like
That's still being worked on.
San Francisco seems like more the what you're describing.
All right. In any case, I don't know how we got to Brooklyn, because Yaakov didn't get to Brooklyn, right? Yaakov only got from one side of the Mishkan to the other. That's the idea. Even though we had extolled him a moment ago, that he was like this idea of connecting the top to the bottom, the Friedrich Rebbe points out, I think it's actually the Rebbe Rashav's Maimon that we're working on here, it says, I'm saying that this is based on, it says from one end of heaven to the other end of heaven. Which basically means from the infinite or Ein Sof till Atzilus, which is called the bottom of heaven. Because as we said before, from Atzilus and on, that's not heaven anymore. The infinite light doesn't shine there at all. That would be called earth. And Yaakov didn't shine to the earth, only from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven. The Ketza Shamayim, Dilasata, who's Sof Atzilus. What's the extreme low of heaven? The end of Atzilus, right? Where basically it's still a godly world. There's no confusion that you're separate from God. And if you want to get it down there also, like so to speak, that secret kav to come out and shine, so you can actually connect heaven to earth, this is through Yosef. Yaakov didn't have, right? Yaakov he pushed the envelope a little bit further than Avram and Yitzchak and anyone else that ever lived before him, but he wasn't able to complete the purpose of creation until Yosef. Yosef who shalit al haaretz, right? This is what it says by Yosef. He ruled the earth, not heavens, right? As we're talking about, the pasuk is simply going on his domination over the land of Mitzrayim. But even there, the fact that Yosef went to Mitzrayim, right, and all the other brothers were afraid to go down there, and it was like off limits, right? This is the Indian of Yosef, and also Yosef means to add, right? It's like just like we said, Yaakov is v'hanora, and, which the idea of and is fusing opposites. The word Yosef itself means and, right? More, which means he was able to kind of bring out even a deeper level of fusion of opposites. Yaakov only fused like the higher heaven with the lower heaven. So this is through Yosef, where it says he ruled over the earth. Yosef was the one who enabled the infinite light to come even into the worlds of Bria, Tzir, and Asiyah. Which of course it eventually did, right? This is the idea of ultimately the giving of the Torah, etc. V'zeu eile toldos Yaakov Yosef, and that's why it says in the pasuk, these are the offspring of Yaakov Yosef. It's a very strange pasuk actually, because Yaakov had more than one child, right? And it says these are the offspring of Yaakov Yosef. It just ends there. It's a beginning of in the pshat of like another sentence. These are the toldos of Yaakov. It's not talking about his children. It's talking about like all the things that happened. And it starts off by saying, starts off by the word saying like Yosef was a nar hanging out with the maidservants. But if you just read the pasuk, it says these are the offspring of Yaakov Yosef, as though this was his only offspring. The Yosef mamshich hagiloim de Yaakov sheiru b'biyah, because Yosef and Yaakov had this special thing going on. What Yaakov was this fuser of opposites, and the offspring of Yaakov was Yosef. He really fused the opposites in completion. He was like the child of Yaakov in that sense, that he did what Yaakov was trying to do, and he completed the job. So that it would go not only into Atzilus, but even into Bria, Tzir, and Asiyah. Val derech ha'hefresh b'na avos u'matan Torah. And this is similar to the difference between the Avos versus the era of Matan Torah. And in this capacity, Yosef represents Matan Torah. Right? Why do we see Yosef is connected with Matan Torah more than anyone else? Ki Matan Torah haya aydei Moshe, because Matan Torah was basically not Yosef, it was really Moshe. How do we get Yosef involved? Moshe, by him it says, V'yikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. It says that Moshe wasn't going anywhere until he took the bones of Yosef, and you don't have to read it as the word bones, you can also read it as atzmos, the essence of Yosef, which the bones of a person is their essence. So how did Moshe go and Mamash bring the Torah to the Jewish people? Because he took the essence of Yosef with him. So we see that Yosef is really kind of aligned with the concept of Matan Torah, which is like a post-Avos experience, What's the difference between the Avos and Matan Torah, which is really the difference between Yaakov and Yosef? Shamshacha al yedei kiyum mitzvahs da Avos haisa ba'atzilus. Matan Torah is chadish yumshach hagila gam b'biyah. Because basically, the Avos, with all their mitzvahs, they actually didn't make any effect in this world. As we know from the fact that even though they did their mitzvahs, they didn't make something called a davar shebekadusha. Yaakov Mustama put on tefillin. It says that he whittled these sticks, right? We talked about this not long ago. What did he do with the sticks when they were done? Threw them in the garbage, right? What do you do with your tefillin when they're done? You kiss them, you put them in special packages, and God forbid something happens to them, you bury them in the ground like a person, right? They're holy. The thing is holy. Yaakov did the mitzvahs, but he didn't make the thing holy. None of the mitzvahs that were done by the Avos left a lasting imprint and made the world a holy place. But what they did do the mitzvahs. So how did it work? What is a mitzvah? Mitzvah means sabsa v'chibur. It means to connect. What do they connect? They connected the Orein Sof with the world of Atzilus. And that's why Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov basically represent the spheros of Atzilus. Their mitzvahs brought down infinite light, but only into spiritual worlds, which was a precursor to the purpose of reality, which is Torah. So Yosef took it a step further than Yaakov did. He's akin to Matan Torah, because Matan Torah can only happen because the bones of Yosef were with Moshe, and therefore we got the Torah. It changes everything. It means that godliness can actually come down into Bri Yitzira, even Asiya, even the Gashmias world, to make the Orein Sof come out of its little hiding place and be in this world, connect infinity with the true finite, which is not the finite as it is in Atzilus version, but the finite on your fleshy arm.
Would that make Yosef Yesod?
Yosef is Yesod. Yes, good call.
So how did he do that? If he wasn't even on the mitzvahs, how did he possibly bring it down to this world?
Well, how did Yaakov bring it into Atzilus? Right? He tapped into something which fused opposites. So even though really there was a big tzimtzum saying, Orein Sof, you're not invited over here. If you go to a Tiferes Netlam, you can fuse the two opposites because you went to a place where they're not opposites. So what if you go to like so to speak a Yesod Netlam? It's not. There's no such thing. But let's say you go deeper into the root, where in other words, even when Yaakov tapped into this fusion of opposites, as we're going to soon see, there's higher levels of fusions inside of Hashem yet. Right? So in other words, the higher you go into the source, the more of oneness you get to. So Yaakov went high enough to find a oneness which fused opposites at a certain level, but it was only a relative fusion of opposites. It wasn't able to fuse literally the top with the bottom. It was able to fuse the top of heaven with the bottom of heaven. So there was yet a deeper level of singularity which Yosef reached up to, which made him negate the oppositions even from heaven and earth.
So wouldn't his mitzvahs actually not matter? Obviously, wouldn't his mitzvahs actually make a difference in this world then? He was able to fuse it down?
So again, they did not in his time. What we're saying is that basically it was a process. He took it further than Yaakov did. And what's the proof? Under his leadership, the Jewish people went to Mitzrayim. So we got to Brooklyn. Did we give? We didn't necessarily like the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? He got to 770. There was still yet one more stage of essentially from 770 shining towards the entire world, the Elyon and the Tachton, but he already got there, right? Yeah.
We say they didn't obviously leave artifacts, but what about Yaakov with the stones? This whole thing that laid the foundation for the base of Mikdash, right? And these stones he sanctified, it poured oil on them. And
Yeah, but again, even after all that,
he just left.
think about it. Even after all that, they're not holy stones. They didn't remain in their kedusha. If later on we use those stones as a mitzvah of Moshe, etc., then we can put kedusha into them. All the mitzvahs, even that we were given by God, for example, the mitzvah of Milah, Rambam says, right? We do not have a Milah because Avram had a Milah. We have a Milah because Moshe commanded us in Milah. Period. So our Milah is a mitzvah from God through Moshe. It's not a mitzvah from God through Avram. Because Avram's mitzvahs were even though this is one of the few things where actually you could say that Avraham's body was kadosh. There's a few exceptions to the rule I just gave. It's when there was an actual commandment from God Whereas Yaakov didn't have an actual commandment from God put on tefillin. He just like sort of aligned himself spiritually to the fact that there was a commandment like that coming. But Avram was actually given a commandment to circumcise himself. So Avram's body was actually kadosh. And that's why it says when he sent Eliezer to go find him a wife, he says, grab my, right? Why? Because that was the only holy object he could swear on in the world. There was no Bible around. It was just Avram, right? So it's because Avram was the precursor to Matan Torah, so he invented like the beginning of the concept of holy artifacts, which was at that time literally just the body of Avram. But we are not, but nonetheless, since the whole Torah hadn't been given, there was only a partial level of the kedusha of the real Torah in the mitzvah of Milah that was given to Avram. Therefore, when we want to tap into the mitzvah of Milah, we pass over the level of mitzvah that Avram got. We want the level of mitzvah that Moshe got because that was the full, true nature of mitzvahs which permeated the world. So even in the realms of mitzvahs, we're not doing it in what the Avos did. Which is strange because even the mitzvahs, the avos, forget alone the sort of private mitzvahs that Yaakov put on tefillin, etc. Even the mitzvah that was given directly by God to Avram to circumcise himself, the mitzvah that you have to circumcise yourself is on a higher level. It's sourced from God in a deeper place inside of himself. Okay, with that, we will hold till tomorrow.
Thank you.